Vayiyu Chayei Sarah Me'as Shana Ve'esrim Shana Ve'sheva Shanim Shnei Chayei Sarah. And that means that well, the Midrash will explain why does it say it like that. And the life of Sarah was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. Why didn't you say 127? But it didn't. So the Midrash gives a reason. And they bring a pasuk from Tehillim. Yodea Hashem Yemei Shemimim. God knows the life of the whole ones. Meaning, you could say it means perfect ones. V'nachalosam la'olam tia. Their inheritance will be forever. Kishem shehen. I'm reading from the Midrash right now. Kishem shehen tamimim. Kach shenoisam tamimim. As they are whole and perfect, their actions, the years that they lived, were all deeds of perfection. Their years were whole and perfect. And she was perfect. Bas chav kibas vav lenoi. She was as beautiful when she was 20 as when she was 7. Lenoi. That's commenting on her beauty. Hey, a 7-year-old girl doesn't have wrinkles. And she was as beautiful as at 20 as she was when she was 7. Bashkuv kibas esnim shana l'chet. She was as free from sin after having lived 100 years. That's after 20 years, when she wasn't even at that time, wouldn't have been accountable for her sins, but she was as sinless at 100 as she was at 20. V'nachlosam le'olam kiyah. Their inheritance will be forever, eternal. Shenemar Vayihi Chayei Sarah. Ma Torah Loimer Shnei Chayei Sarah. The pasuk reads Vayihi Chayei Sarah es Meir Shanim be'esrim Shanim be'sheva Shanim. 100 years. And so we said that she was sinless at 100. In 100 years of her living, she didn't commit any sins. As she was free of sins at 20. And she was as beautiful at 20 as she was at 7. But the pasuk ends with these, a couple of words that seemingly are extra. Shnei Chayei Sarah. These are the years of Sarah's life. So wait a minute, Torah doesn't say anything extra. There's meaning in everything in Torah. So why after saying these are the years of Sarah? 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. These are the years of Sarah. You said it already that she was 127 years old. But it's very important what it's going to say the Midrash is going to say, the reason it says this at the end of the sentence is, Loimar lecha, to tell you, shechabiv chayehem shel tzadikim, the lives of the righteous ones, lifnei hamokim, is just important in front of the omnipresent. God is called in some places omnipresent. God is omniscient, omnipotent, all-knowing, omnipotent, all-powerful, and all-present. He's everywhere. And here, this is very important. What's going to say? Why did it say again how old she was? It was said already. Sarah lived. These are years of Sarah. 100 years. We explained why it says years afterwards. 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. These are the years of Sarah. You don't repeat in Torah. Well, why did God say this? God is a narrator. Why every word is holy, sacred, and important. And with these extra words that's right after saying how old she was, why did it say again, this is the life of Sarah? And the Midrash says, Shechabiv chayehem shel tzadikim lifnei hamakom, because the years of life of the tzaddikim are as important before the omnipresent ba'olam hazeh u'la'olam haba. Again, Torah speaks about two worlds. In this world, she was as perfect as she was in the next world. The next world, we can't relate to it because we don't have the sensitivities given to us to be sensitive to what goes on in the next world. But as soon as a person passes from this world, she enter the next world. Simultaneously, I just told that's why God created the world with a maze, Bereshit, because in Torah we count, in Hebrew we count with letters. Beis is the second, and in Numbers it's 2. And that is to tell us immediately that there are two worlds. And somebody who doesn't accept it is at a great loss, uneducated. What goes bad in this world immediately corrected in the next world. World 1, God forbid, tragically, 6 million of our people were brutally massacred. But this world is just a dot in time. All these were killed because they were God's representative. They were killed because they were Jews. And even if some of them who were killed did not live like Jews, but Hitler, Yamach Shemo, may his name be obliterated, knew that he knew they were Jewish. He didn't care about what the level of observance was. They were Jews. And they were killed because they were Jews, because they were God's representative. And therefore, right away, they are called mushers, and a higher term, Kedoshim, holy ones. Because and their life is one of great bliss, which we can't explain because we don't have the sense not given to us, like trying to explain to a blind person a panorama, or to a sound a deaf person a symphony. Can't explain Olam Haba to this world. The pleasures, come directly from the God Almighty, and in this world, world Aleph, world number one, we enjoy everything that God has created. And if we're so enjoyable and blissful from the things that God created, how much more so will we be blissful from God Himself? There are no atheists in the next world. The presence of the Supreme Being is, as soon as one closes his eyes for the last time, maybe after 120 years by everybody, but as soon as they close their eyes, God's presence is very felt. And if anybody has intelligence on this world and knows that this is not an accident, this is not from a big bang, that everything is by purpose and by design, and you see that design, and you see that purpose, and you see the world. The Rambam says one of the ways to know God in this world and to be a believer, besides the fact that God appeared, and one of the mitzvahs is to remember that appearance on the sixth day of Sivan in the year 2448 in the desert at Mount Sinai. 3 million people went through that scene at Sinai that wowed them, scared them. They heard the voice of God, and they of the first two commandments, and it was overwhelming, to say the least, experience. And they begged Moshe, Moshe, we believe, we know God is talking to us. God is relating to us. Wow, what's going on with this mountain? It's burning, and the sound of the shofar is making us deaf. And we hear it. And the sound of the shofar is a scary one to begin with. It's supposed to sound like crying. But anyway, all the things the scene at Sinai is described in the Torah. And 3 million people were there to witness that God revealed Himself as much as a human being could take and more. We know, and this is what the Midrash tells us. I'll call the Dibur v'Dibur Portion Ishmasan. On every word that God said at Sinai in His revelation to the Jews, they died. They couldn't take the revelation of God. It's like I told you a million times that when a prophet, all the prophets except Moses, except Moshe, got a prophecy, they flipped out. If you would look at him while he's having it, you say he's having some kind of fit, some kind of paralysis, some kind of he's knocked out, she's knocked out. If they in just feeling the presence of God coming upon them, you think they had some kind of a seizure until they came back after the. This is all the great named prophets, except Moses, except Moshe. Moshe could stand face to face with God, whatever face God it can be called faith, but Moshe could take it. Moshe could be with God 40 days and 40 nights and not eat. And Moshe was the son of, he was the son of daughter of Yisro, Zipporah. No, that was his wife. But he was the son of Amram, who was the son of Levi. And Moshe, his last name was Amrami, the son of Amram. And Mrs. Amram. But he was godly. He was called Ish Elohim, man of God, because he was the most godly person that existed. And he was also called, God explains in the Parsha where God explains to Miriam and her brother Aaron. Miriam was the oldest. She was 126. Aaron was 123. Moshe was 120 when they passed away. But when God was kicked off and angry at them because they said they talked negative about Moshe. What negative thing? That he stopped living with his wife. They heard it from her herself. So we're no longer living like husband and wife. Hey, that's not Jewish. The Miriam said to Aaron, we're also prophets. And we are allowed intimacy like every other male and female, and it's actually a mitzvah. And there are, of course, the boundaries of that. There has to be mikvah, and the pool. The woman can't be in her period at the time. But hey, Jews have the biggest families. And the least divorces. Divorce is allowed in Torah. But anyway, God was not happy by Miriam talking negative about her brother who stopped living intimately with his wife, with Zipporah. And she told that to Moshe. And what her mistake was that, yes, intimacy is not only permitted, but commanded by God, marriage. However, Moshe already had 2 children with his wife, and he was 80 years old. And because he was always open and ready for God's appearance, and Moses was the only one who could start a dialogue with God, a conversation with God. So he was told by God after the giving of the Torah, no less. And the people told for 3 days they should not have intimacy because that the intimacy brings a certain type of impurity, a certain type of ineligibility to go into the holy places until they've gone through a mikvah. And it's not a negative thing. And again, it's Miriam told Aaron, who listened to her, and God was mad at both of them because, hey, if Moshe does something, it's only because he was told to do it by the God Almighty. And when the God Almighty said, this period of purity to everybody, these 3 days when I appeared to you, okay, it's over. You can all go back to your tents, to your marital living. But God said to Moshe, not you, but Ata po amodi madi, stay with me. And don't go back to your tent. And God commanded that his separation from his wife. Now, I don't know if it was a total separation or just a separation from intimacy. But God bawled out 2 prophets, Miriam and Aaron, for even thinking that Moses stopped living intimately with his wife on his own. He's a prophet, I'm a prophet. God tells you what that is perfectly fine, and it's commanded for man to be intimate with his wife according to the laws of Kiddushin. Marriage is called Kiddushin, holiness, and the halachas in the Shulchan Aruch take it out of the Torah of how and when male and female can mate. And again, the biggest families are by the Hasidim, you know, and hopefully also the happiest marriages. But anyway, so the so Moses was the holiest man that ever lived, and God told them also that he is the humblest man that ever lived. How could he be the humblest man that ever lived? He was the only one who came so close to God. And did so much for the Jewish people. That was their teacher. And he was the greatest man. He saw more of God than any human being. So how could God say Moses is the humblest man of anyone who has lived on this world? And this is not false modesty or humility. And the answer was given. Moses said, look, that I'm as holy as I am, I've come as close to God as more than anyone in history. Interesting. Maimonides says that Mashiach, the son of David, who will be the Messiah, Mashiach, he's the next Navi to come. He is a Chacham Gadol Mishleimai. He will be even smarter than Solomon, who was called the smartest man in the world. And not just of his time, but of all time. And Nabi Karov Moshe, Messiah, Mashiach ben David, will, as far as Solomon, the wisest man of the world, Mashiach takes over that title. He's the wisest man in the world. And Navi Karov Moshe, he will be a prophet close to the level attained by Moshe, but not the same, close to it, but not, in other words, the second greatest prophet, but not Moshe. That's one of the 13 principles of the faith. And Moshe is Abu Navim. He's the greatest Navi that ever lived and will ever live. And if you want to know more about Moshe, go study all the things that the Portion say about him in the chapters of the Revelation. So I said that this is why does it say that it Shnei Chayei Sarah, because she lived in two worlds. And this is a very important, God forbid, to call it a fairy tale or as something unreal. The next world is as real as this world. Only this world, God made us sensitive to, and we have all the senses that we need to live in this world. And the next world, we're told about it. But by who? By the Creator. And we're told that Creator created two worlds. And in the next thing, I think I got out of this whole thing. The next thing, there are no atheists in the next world. And you know what the Rambam says, and what's going to be our how we're going to spend the time in the next world, to getting to know God. And who's going to be very busy? Those who learn Torah in the first world. Oh, they be busy in the next world where everybody wants to know. Teach us about God, teach us about God, teach us Torah. And Lubavitcher Shluchim will be very busy in the next world as well as in this world. And that's what we're looking forward to, the times of Mashiach, when, as it says, the occupation of the whole world, Jew and non-Jew alike, will become to know God, the Creator. And the Jews will go into Torah, and non-Jews will want to know the 7 Noahide laws that God gave to humanity. And there are people who are disseminating the 7 laws. Unfortunately, most of humanity doesn't begin to know about the 7 laws and profess different religions. But the Rebbe was the one, more than any other Jew in history, that proclaimed the very importance of the 7 laws that God gave to humanity, and put all his followers on being very much aware of this, and very much important on teaching this to the non-Jews, so that our mission is God consciousness, that everybody should be aware of God. We are not a proselyting religion, and nowhere where God commands a non-Jew, somebody born non-Jewish, to become Jewish. You got to be a Jew. No. There's no such thing. You could have eternity with God through learning about God, and that's one of the 7 mitzvahs, and living a godly life as a non-Jew. Certain beliefs are not kosher and prohibited, but believing in the oneness of God and not blaspheming God, and the oneness of God, and loving God and fearing God and, not killing, not committing sexual sins. And heaven forbid to allow your life to be in a form of anarchy. Everybody does what he wants. Oh, no. There has to be law and order based on the law which God has given humanity. And there has to be courts of law and order. Law and order, the opposite of anarchy, is one of the mitzvahs. And the one kosher is that a non-Jew also cannot, just like it cannot live from flesh that has been taken from an animal that's still alive. In other words, it's called Iver Minachai, any limb that's taken before the animal is, as humanely as possible, been put to death, and then you can cook his ribs and his flesh, and becomes part of you when you eat him, and you have the energy from him. That's the way the animal becomes one with God through you. If you use the strength that you get from eating a steak and helping another person, learning Torah, you need energy for that. And you get it from the steak, from the chicken. And that gives you the right to kill the steak in a way that God told you how. In the least painful way. And somebody who is not using the energy that he gets from a steak or a chicken, a turkey, or a lamb, doesn't use it in a destructive way rather than a constructive way. And building the world is better off not eating meat. Shouldn't eat meat. You kill an animal for that, for being destructive. The animal wants to be killed kosher. And that is the elevation of the energy, or you could say soul of the animal. And so that's one of the 7 laws, is not to cause pain to animals. And the law in itself is not to take and cut a leg of a cow, for instance, and go broil it, and the cow is writhing in pain. And take its life first, and any other thing that kosher, only a Jew has this a commandment from the eating only the species that is kosher. The kosher species is cattle, cows, lambs, goats. That's kosher, and chickens, pigeons, and fish that have fins and scales. But someone who's not a Jew can eat different animals, different species, as long as they're killed before they eat them in a painless way. In the laboratories where they experience they experiment on animals, a Jew and a non-Jew who was apprised of not being cruel to the animal will be very careful how to deal with this animal, not just throw it away and harm it. Anyway, so that's why here I'm just giving this all to you, and why it's necessary, and what the Midrash says. Why does it say, and these are the years of Sarah, 100 years? Why does it say years after? Why not just 127? And we learned that because they say that she was as beautiful at 20 as she was at 7, and she was as sinless at 100 as she was at 20. And these were the years of her and these are the years of her life, because just as she's perfect in her earthly life, and God is satisfied. Here, God is called the omnipresent, because God is the God on this world, in this world. And the name of the game is to get to really feel His presence in your life and live your life in the service of the Creator that makes your life worthwhile on this level of life. There is also the next your life continues. I told you what I heard in the presence of the Rebbe with a whole bunch of college kids, and I was asked by the Rebbe Secretariat to prepare these 100 college kids who were taking a course on the Baal Shem Tov, and the Rebbe was very happy about that. And this was in 1960, the 200th anniversary of the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidus, was born in 1698, and he passed away in 1760 on the holiday of Shavuos. And therefore, 1960 was 200 years of the Yortzeit of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Rebbe really made a big call so storm that everybody should get to know the Baal Shem Tov. And the Hillel rabbis and the Hillel of B'nai B'rith, to their credit, voted to make the Baal Shem Tov the theme of their education for all their branches. And they printed literature on that. And one of the rabbis knew that the Rebbe would be very pleased with this, and he asked if the Rebbe give them a time when they'll bring 10 kids from 10 major campuses, universities in New York, New Jersey, and to meet with them. And I was asked to be the warm-up to prepare them for their meeting with the Rebbe, which was a great honor. And in that, because I was the one who prepared them and answered their questions and told them how to act in front of a Rebbe. The Rebbe is a holy man. And they asked me all kinds of questions, but that gave me the privilege of going in with them to the Shiur, to the audience with the Rebbe. And I stood very close to the Rebbe because it was indicated I would have to translate what the Rebbe said from the Rebbe speaking Yiddish. Boy, was I scared. one of the Hill rabbis, a bunch of rabbis came with the Hill directors came with the kids, and the girls stood on one side of the Rebbe's office near the windows, and the boys stood near the glass cupboard with the books, the shelves of books, and the rabbi stood in the middle, and I stood right on top of the Rebbe's desk, very close to the Rebbe. And boy, was I glad when one of the Hill rabbis said to ask Rebbe if he would please speak in English because the kids don't understand any Yiddish. And so the Rebbe acquiesced, and boy, I was off the hook. Was I happy? It's a big responsibility to translate the Rebbe's words. But anyway, I'm saying this because I'm talking about the next world. And one of the kids there asked the Rebbe, how does Hasidus understands the afterlife? And the Rebbe answered the kid right away, I would not call it afterlife. I would call it continuation of life. You live 70, 80, the years mentioned in Psalms, 120 years, the longest someone can live in our time, and that's in Scripture. And you live your first life, Again, they're saying, I wouldn't call it afterlife. That's what the student asked, what's the Hasidic take on the afterlife? And the Rebbe said, I would not call it afterlife. I would call it continuation of life. You live 70, 80, 100 years on this life, 121, 122, 123. Your life is extended in the next world. How that life is, that's beyond our understanding. And we are not, we know that it exists. And the Talmud gives a statement that 1 hour of life in the world to come is greater bliss than living in the first world, 70 years without any problems or pain. 1 hour in the world to come is a greater bliss than that. But then the Talmud also says that 1 hour of doing mitzvahs, learning Torah, on this world is even greater as far as in this world you can serve God. And the next world, this is the world of action, and the next world is the world of consequences, how you live your life. And the good news is if somebody did not live his life in a pure way, as long as he's alive, he can do return, tshuva, repentance. He can do, and erase from his record the bad things that he or she did. Okay, anyway, so that's the first teaching in the Midrash. The next Midrash goes on a pasuk that they bring from Koheles, Ecclesiastes, and the that starts with this sentence: "B'zorach Hashemesh u'bo Hashemesh." The sun shines, the sun rises, u'bo Hashemesh, and the sun descends, the sun sets. Omar Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, V'chi ein anu Yodin shezorach Hashemesh u'bo Hashemesh. Well, the sun have to tell us this, that the sun rises and the sun sets. Don't we know that? Ain't that experience that every person experiences? Sunrise and sunset? So the Midrash goes on to say, and what are you being told by this? That the sun rises and the sun sets? Shelo Yashkia HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shimsho Shel Tzadik. The God Almighty, the Holy One, blessed be He. And that's the most oft used description of God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. God will not cause Shimsho Shel Tzadik. God will not let the sun of one tzaddik set, and there's one tzaddik leaving this world. Achehu mazriach shimsho shel tzaddik chabeiro. God doesn't let the sun, the shine of one tzaddik till another tzaddik of his level. It's called chabeiro, somebody who's his buddy. So God doesn't let Shimsho Shel Tzadik Hu Mazliach Shimsho Shel Tzadik Chaberoi. He causes another tzaddik to rise up, the buddy of the first tzaddik. God doesn't leave this world without the presence of a tzaddik. Yoim Shemesh Rabbi Akiva, the greatest sage in Jewish history, one of the greatest, at least. And you know Rabbi Akiva, and he was the Rebbe of the Zohar. And Rabbi Akiva, again, the one who caused him to become the greatest scholar was his wife. He was not a scholar in any way for the first 40 years of his life. But his wife, they met and they married, and she saw he was a tremendous candidate for learning. And she showed him a stone on which water was running on it from a waterfall, and the stone made a hole in the stone. And so they figured that if that stone, hard stone, could absorb water and it make a dent. Certainly, Torah, that's called water, living waters, can make a dent in a 40-year-old person. And she sent him to learn. And she lived a tough life supporting herself. And in the first 12 years of his study, when he became 52, he had already 12,000 students, and he came home for a break. And her friends, they knew that the news spread. I don't know what they had, like CNN or, but the news spread that he's coming back, and he's coming with 12,000 guests. And they find a way to feed them after he's coming, and they wouldn't take leave of him. And the women talked to her like in astonishment. Hey, aren't you glad that your husband is coming back and now as a scholar? And he learned in Jerusalem, wherever he learned in the greatest houses of learning. And she said, "No, I'm not glad. If you would take my advice, he'd go back and learn another 12 years, just to get even more polished, because he was becoming the greatest sage amongst the Jewish people in Israel." And he heard that. So he just turned around and went back to his yeshiva and learned. And then he came back with 24,000 students. And then she was happy and she went out to greet him. And the students, she grabbed onto his feet and kissed his feet, and the students wanted to toss her away, move her away from Rabbi Akiva. They didn't know she was his wife. And she said, "Leave her. Yours and mine is from her. She's the reason that I studied so much Torah, and you learned so much from me. And honor her." And she was very honored, and they lived until he was 120. I don't know how old she was. Anyway, there's a lot to study about Rabbi Akiva. But this teaching that God doesn't let the sun set on one tzaddik until he brings the other tzaddik on the world. And that's what it says here. Yom Shemesh Rabbi Akiva, the day that Rabbi Akiva passed away, Noad Rabbeinu, next greatest sage, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was born. Right before his sunset, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was called Rabbeinu, our Rebbe, because he's the one that codified the Mishnah. And then it goes on to say those who passed away. The Korah Arab, everybody said, Rabbi Akiva died. V'zorach HaShemesh. Hey, Rabbeinu Kodesh was born. God didn't leave generation without the presence of the tzaddik. I know what question is forming in your minds right now, and it's been certainly on my mind for 30 years. I have an answer. I haven't. We'll talk about it. Let me finish this. Yom Shemesh Rabbeinu, the day that Rabbeinu died, if you don't know, see, Nolad Rab Ada Bar Abba. That was the next great sage. And they said, the people, the Karo Allah, the Zorach Hashemesh, the sun shined, Uba Hashemesh, after the sun, after Rabbeinu HaKodesh passed away, a student of his, Abba Bar Abba, was born. Yom Shemesh Rabadu Bar Abba, Nolad Rabbi Abun. They called Allah, and they said the same pasuk to people. The Zorach Hashemesh. The sun set. Uba Hashemesh. And the sun came up. This one tzaddik died, and another one came up to replace him. Yom Shemesh Rabbi Avun. Nola Rabbi Avun Berei. When Abun passed away, his son, Rabbi Abun, was born. Yom Shemesh Rabbi Avun, Nolad Abba Hoshea, Ish Tria. Yom Shemesh Abba Hoshea, Nolad Rabbi Hoshea, the Karo, Allah. The sun shined and the sun went down. So one sage died, but another of his stature was born. I mean, you tell the stature after he grew up, but he was there. Achelo Ishkia Shimsha Shel Moshe. Before Moshe died, he's Riach Shimsha Shel Yehoshua. The son, the rays, the son of his student, Moshe's student, Yehoshua. So when the sunshine of Moshe went down, Achule Hiskia Shimsho Shel Moshe, even before the rays of the sun of Moshe went down, Hiziach Shimsho Shel Yehoshua, son of Yehoshua, went up. Shenemar, Vayima Hashem el Moshe, God said to Moshe in Bamidbar, Kach lecha es Yehoshua binun, take Yeshua binun, Isha Sharuch bo, he will be your follower, your descendant. So every generation has a Moshe. Ad Shelo Shaka Shimsha Shel Yehoshua, before the son of Joshua faded, went down, Zorcha Shimsha Shel Asniel ben Kenaz, the light of Asniel ben Kenaz, he was the first judge, began to shine. She'amar, Yehuda Asniel Ben Kelaz. Asniel Ben Kelaz was the next in line to Yoshua. Asher Lo Shaka Shimshon Shel Eli. Eli was a great prophet, but who succeeded him? Zorcha Shemesh Shel Shmuel. Eli was the Kohen in the base in the tent. There wasn't the base of Mikdash yet, but there was the tent of meeting. There was the Mishkan, where they offered sacrifices, and it's taught in the two chapters of Truma and Ketava, all the laws of the Kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, and the clothes of the Kohanim are mentioned in those two chapters. And Eli was the head of the Jewish people before Shmuel was born. And then we have the whole story of Hannah, how she prayed for a holy son being born to her, and she would bring him to the temple, and he would be the successor of Eli. And sure he was. Shnemar Ner Elokim Terem Yavo, before the light of God went off of Eli. Shmuel Shochev V'Heichal Hashem. Shmuel was there laying in the Heichal, the portal of God, in the dwelling of God, the Mishkan. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Ad Shelo Hishkia HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shimsha Shel Sarah. Before Sarah died, that's what relates to this parsha. Chazra Shimsha Shel Rivka. And that's what we learn in the rest of the parsha, how Rivka is found for a match to Yitzchak. And Rivka, Sarah, is the first matriarch of the Jewish people, and Rivka is the second one. So it says, and this pasuk, B'zarach HaShemesh Uba HaShemesh, the sun rises and the sun sets. And this is to teach us that in every generation, before the sun sets of one great power and stage and personality, there's another one born to succeed and follow him. So that's what that it says. Hine Yolda, he was informed Milka Gamhi Banim, and one of them was Basuel, and he gave birth. His wife gave birth. Achar Kach, then it says by Chayei Sarah Me'er Shana. After Rivka was born, right, she replaced, Sarah passed away. There wasn't left a vacuum. So what's with our generation? I'm sure everybody asks me, how come nobody has replaced the Rebbe? There's no successor to the Rebbe. It's already close to 32 years. And the answer, I don't know the answer really. We did no answer given except that where do people look for the Rebbe? Never been such a thing set by one certain sect of Hasidim, Breslov, and they go to the holy resting place of the Rebbe. I think it's in Westler Hasidim go to the Rebbe. They have a whole thing built around his grave, and it's in Ukraine. But anyway, but here, the everybody thought that the movement would wane, the whole lot would go down. It would not continue at its level of growth. And just the opposite, it's become bigger because the Zohar says that tzaddik is pater, a tzaddik who passes away in this world, tzaddik is pater, maimo, nimsa, b'chol elumas yakim v'chayohi. The tzaddik is even more powerful after he passes away, and is not limited to a body. He lives in all worlds more than when he was alive. Compared to the Rebbe, it's like a midget being compared to the Rebbe was that kind of a leader, and I've been with the Rebbe since the middle 50s. And I went from one yeshiva to the Rebbe's yeshiva. That's a whole story in itself. But the Rebbe didn't want, he was the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe. And when the previous Rebbe passed away in 1950, people wanted, they knew of the brilliance and spiritual powers of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe didn't want to become Rebbe. And a whole year they were begging him, and he wouldn't do. He would answer their questions, and brilliantly. And many miracles were performed from the Rebbe's answer. Maybe I should tell you some at another time when we start bringing. But the question, where is the Rebbe's successor? The Rebbe is, and he'll always be his successor because he did so much in this world, and he created the whole Chabad movement. He in his 40 years of leadership, and the whole new institution called Chabad, down through the years of the exile, there were synagogues, houses of learning. But the Rebbe created another complementary institution, Chabad House. And there's no place that doesn't have a Chabad House. And there's a Chabad House in every state in the 50 states in the whole United States of America and all over the world. 4,000 Chabad houses and shluchim. And today, most of the shluchim never met the Rebbe, never saw the Rebbe except in the televisions where we see everything has been very well documented. and in Chabad. Unfortunately, I was, in the Rebbe's physical life, very close to the Rebbe, as I am now. I write to the Rebbe constantly, and there's ways of the best way is to go there and write notes and drop it on the Rebbe's grave, and he'll find a way to answer you. And, however, you don't have to be there. First of all, you can send a letter there, and they have people who are charged, and if you want them to read your letter, they'll read it. If you don't, they'll just drop it on the Rebbe's grave. And unbelievable stories have come out of that. So the one answer that was that, hey, what are we talking about here? Zorach HaShemesh, Ubo HaShemesh. Sun rises, shines, and goes down, and it sets. And after one tzaddik passes away, his son sets, another tzaddik rises. And there are some opinions in Midrash that Mashiach will be from somebody who is resurrected. And those are things that we are yet to see. And hopefully, very exciting. Hopefully, this is the generation that will see the coming of Mashiach and the building of the temple. If that's what Mashiach has to do, that's the litmus test that he's Mashiach. He knows where and how to build the temple. He's the next Navi, the next prophet. Who has to be a prophet who knows exactly where the Beis Hamikdash is. What time do we have? I'm going to learn. I'd like to learn at least another. Where is my
9:15, Rabbi?
It's 9:15. Okay, so we can at least learn till 9:30. Okay, I'm gonna teach. We're gonna learn another piece that we've learned already. But what are these? Sarah lives 127 years, right? Where else is the number 127 mentioned by a great historical woman in our history? 127. Where? In the story of Purim. Esther, who was chosen queen of all the cities in the world. That was the world power was Persia. And Esther was the ruler. She was the queen of Maya, Veshivim, Besheva, Medinos. She was the queen of 127 states, countries. So here the Midrash asks the following question and gives an answer. And he gives it in a very interesting manner. This comes forth. Rabbi Akiva Haya Yoshev V'Doresh. Rabbi Akiva, okay, we learned about him. He was a great sage. He was sitting, and he was Doresh. Midrash, you got the word, and Doresh means expounding from Torah. Vatzibur misnamneng. The audience was falling asleep. Wait. There's a lecturer. A lecturer knows when he sees people sleeping. Rabbi Akiva haya doirish. Yeshe v'doirish. He was sitting in darshaning. Vatzibur misnamneng. And the audience, the great part of the audience, was dozing. BK's lighter on. He wanted to wake them. Omar. So he brings his teaching right from our sentence, from the first sentence. Ma Rosa Esther. What did Esther, the queen of Persia, Shekimoch al Sheva be'Esrim umea Medina. That's where you hear these 127 years ago number yet, but this is a number of states. The first time we hear it is when we hear about how long Esther lived, 127. The second time we hear the number 127 is by Esther, that she ruled together with her husband, Achashverosh, who wasn't the holiest person and not the smartest person, to the point that the Midrash and the Gemara call him a tipesh, a fool. But he was powerful. So she reigned with him. He chose her to be the queen. But the Midrash asks, Rabbi Akiva is using this Midrash to wake up the people who fell asleep on him. BK's later on. He wanted to wake them up. Omar. Ma Rasa Esther. What did Esther see? Shetimloch al Sheva be'Esrim umeya Medina. What did she see? How did it come about that Esther should reign over her? She'd be the queen over 127 countries. That was the whole world at the time. And Persia was the world power. Ella. Tabo Esther. Esther should come. She was worthy. Shahaisha Basbita Shelsara. Left. Esther is the appropriate successor of Sarah, who lived. Esther, who was the daughter of the daughter. In other words, she was the great granddaughter of Sarah. So, Rabbi Akiva says, Elotava Esther Shehoisha Bas Bita Shel Sarah. Let Esther come, who was the daughter of the daughter of Sarah. Shechaisha, that Sarah lived, Kuf, 100, B'chav, 20, B'zayin, 7, B'simloch al Kuf, Chav, B'zayin, Medinos. Let Esther follow the worthiness of Esther to become a queen of the world power of the time, 127 Medinos, states, countries. Why did she have that merit? Because she was the great-granddaughter of Sarah, who had all these wonderful, as we learned, wonderful traits. Now you could ask, wait a minute, Esther didn't want this. Esther was the relative of Mordecai who brought her up. And when they had a contest to find a new queen after he killed the old queen, Vashti, after she wouldn't come naked to his Achashverosh's big feast, he was so enraged that she wouldn't listen to him that he killed her at Haman's advice. Anyway, but Esther didn't want to become queen. It's the last thing she wanted to be. This guy's not Jewish. Achashverosh. And there are different opinions on Esther's beauty. One opinion is that she's called Hadassah. You know what color the Hadassah leaf that we just had it in the Lubov. It's green. And Esther had a green complexion. And she was 75 years old. So, yet, she was chosen to be the queen by Achashverosh. And it was ultimately she, the Jewish nation, there was the worst decree that ever was on the Jewish people. Every Jew, something, there are those who would like the same thing to happen to every Jew now. I said it again. They want the whole Jewish nation to be killed. God forbid, it will never happen. Because the Jewish people are the children, and God Almighty won't let it happen. Why the God allows such persecution that we've seen throughout history? But the 6 million Jews weren't destroyed. They were physically rebuilt in the next world. Those who were murdered on October 7th, slaughtered, to be rebuilt in the next world. We don't know how what's the mechanics. That's God's hands. But in this Midrash, what is the meaning that the Kila chose this Midrash that Esther ruled over 127 provinces in the merit of Sarah, who lived 127 years. He was trying First of all, he was trying to awaken them with people get excited when they hear some interesting question in Jewish history. That and before I says that Rabbi Kiva Yoshev Ubedoresh, he was sitting and expounding, and what should I say that a lecturer who wants to keep the people awake, and in all due respect to Rabbi Akiva, and I hope that I'm not in any way offending the greatest rabbi and teacher by saying that if we want to get people not to sleep, we walk around when we lecture, and we are not Yoshev B'Darish. We don't sit and darshan, but chas v'sholom, heaven forbid that I should teach something to Rabbi Akiva. I'm just offering what we do to try to keep people awake. There might be tremendous reasons why Rabbi Akiva couldn't do that. And certainly I'm a fan of Rabbi Akiva, like every Jew is. And but there are those who want to explain this in this way, that Esther lived in a very difficult time, and he wanted to show that. And Rabbi Akiva, one commentator, one rabbi, said that Rabbi Akiva says, look at the reward that Esther got for her great-great-great-grandmother's living such a wonderful life, every moment being useful. And for every moment she got a town, and another moment a city, and another moment a state. And what this is why they're making the comparison with Rabbi Akiva wanted to do. He wanted to teach his people that, hey, you're learning Torah. Why are you sleeping? Why are you wasting your time? You should be wide awake and learning the Torah book. What Esther got for living her life. Look what Sarah got for living her life, every moment being meaningful and living it. Why are you wasting your life by falling asleep in the middle of a Torah lecture? And that's how we wanted to wake them up, to compare, to the worth of every moment in life. And hey, the person got to sleep, but you sleep in your bed at home, not in the lecture hall where you fall asleep. And it wasn't a compliment to the great Rabbi Akiva. That's how some authorities explain this Midrash. And if you got an explanation of your own, feel free to offer it. So, I think we'll close with this. If anybody has any questions, please ask. And God God willing, I should be able to report to you on our World Convention. I'm only going for the conclusion of the convention, which is the most important part. And I will certainly, God willing, report to you on this is the biggest convention of any Jewish organization. And hopefully, with God's help, I'll be able to leave, God willing, after Shabbos and be there for convention's conclusion. Okay, so let me wish you all a good Shabbos, and we'll be together again next week in Reis Hashem.
Thank you so much, Rabbi, and I can't wait to hear about your convention.
Well, thank you. I hope that I have only good to report. I've been at many of these conventions, and they're impactful for the whole Jewish people. And again, this question that we evoke by saying, this teaching in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, the sun sets and the sun rises, and they ask the question, don't we know that? What is being taught here? And they come along with it. When one sun, star, who is shining, and it starts out with Rabbi Akiva, whom we just learned with his lecturing, and one star, and he's mentioned maybe certainly from the most often sages in the Talmud. His sun set, Rabbi Akiva, right away. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, was born, who codified the whole Torah, the written Torah, which was passed on and which was dictated by God to Moshe, and then the oral Torah, which is in Moshe taught the people orally. They took notes, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was born right after Rabbi Akiva passed away. And so the question here, it's already 31, the sun, I think this is the answer, the sun didn't set on the Rebbe. He created such a movement that he's very present. And as the Kabbalah says, so it says that a tzaddik doesn't, he physically, he is buried, and he has to be buried. But the tzaddik doesn't, they've dug up tzaddikim after many years, and their bodies are whole, but they are not physically alive. But they are alive in a world that's beyond us, and they live there, and they're aware of those who, especially those who were close to them in their lifetime. But to every Jewish person, and actually the Rebbe's big thing was to every human being. And we all know what the Rebbe wanted. And he wanted us to spread Torah and bring people, as we've learned, people bringing a person to Torah, to monotheism. It's like creating him. As a nefesh asher asa b'chol, the soul that he made in her. And so the Rebbe made so many souls. I mean, brought them under the wings of the Shekhinah, brought them to believing in one God. Brought them out of the biggest scholars, brought them out of atheism into belief in one God. and he's still doing it. So their sons never sat down on the Rebbe. True, he is buried in there. But what he started, what he was in his life, and the divine assistance that he had and has, goes on. So to the question, who will succeed the Rebbe? The Rebbe himself. Somebody asked, I think it was a New York Times reporter, on a big article on the Rebbe, and asked him who is going to succeed the Rebbe. You know, he had no nuclear children. I mean, the Rebbe succeeded his father-in-law. His father-in-law had 3 daughters and 3 sons-in-law, and the Rebbe was the one deemed as the most worthy to be the previous Rebbe's successor. And the Rebbe answered him, I believe that Mashiach will come in my time, and Mashiach will answer that question about who will succeed me. So, in the New York Times. Okay, so let me wish you all a good Shabbos. And we'll see you, God willing, next week.
Good job.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Have a very good Shabbos. Be well.
Good Shabbos.
Yes, be well.